mysterious. What we're dealing with here is a Georgia peach. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Cryptid Mysterious. Today's Bigfoot encounter comes to us from Greg out of Georgia. This one's back in 1968. He begins. Well, wait. Smash that subscribe button for me if you would, and let me know where you're listening from. I always love getting in the comments and seeing where everybody's listening from. Greg begins. My grandparents had a nice spread of land north of Atlanta, which butted up against the Chattahoochee National Forest. At the time, my parents and I, as well as my two siblings, lived in the northwest corner of South Carolina. Generally, once a month, we would travel to our grandma and grandpa's house for a weekend visit. It wasn't all that far away. We really enjoyed spending time with them at their house, and Grandpa was retired military. My grandma never held a job. That's how things were in that day and time. It seemed to work out very well for everyone. My memories are that of going to my grandparents' house as far back as the late 50s. My grandma would always have a peach pie and a peach cobbler waiting for us when we arrived. She was a fantastic cook and baker and always had delicious things in store for our stay. There are two things that I must tell you coming into this whole Bigfoot thing. First of all, what ended in 1968 had begun in 1967. The second thing is that I never saw anything. I'm simply telling you the story that my grandpa told to us. My grandparents had lived in this home since I was about 2 years old. I was the youngest of 3 children. At the time of my grandfather's encounter, I was about 12 and well able to understand what had happened and what was being said about the booger, as Grandpa called it. My grandma was not a farmer in the least, but they'd purchased this parcel from a farming family who was selling the farm. They just happened to buy the lot, had the home on it, and the rest of the land was sold in pieces. I don't recall exactly, but I want to say it had about 5 acres. One section of the property had old peach trees on it. These trees were big enough and sturdy enough that I could climb around them as a youth. It was from these very same trees that my grandma used to pick the peaches with which she made all these delicious peach dishes. I remember hearing my mom talking about my grandma on the phone in '68 about someone stealing all the peaches from their orchard. My mom and dad were later talking about it at the dinner table, and so I had heard the whole story for myself. Apparently, my grandma had only picked a small amount of peaches, and the two of them had planned to go back out the following week to pretty much harvest the rest. They said that the week following, when they had gone out, their 6 trees were picked clean. There wasn't so much as a worm-eaten fruit left to be found. Nothing was on the ground either. My grandfather was a fighting mad when he saw what happened, but there was nothing he could do in his mind except to place the blame on the neighbors or their children, maybe. If it was the kids, he couldn't make any sense out of children coming home with hundreds of peaches without them asking where they came from. Things were very different in those days. And it would have been a very shameful thing on the part of a parent to overlook such a thing. My grandparents actually had to go and purchase peaches that year so my grandma could bake. It was during one of our visits the following year that Grandpa divulged his plan. We could tell that he'd been fuming about what had happened the whole year and was determined not to let it happen again. He had set up 2 very well-concealed blinds in the woods by the trees, and he said he didn't care if it took him a month. He was going to stake out. If someone came in to steal peaches, they were going to get a load of buckshot in the ass, for sure. And the longer he had to wait, the more shot they would be receiving. I'll tell you right now, he was on a mission. When the season had arrived, I remember my mother telling my dad how his father had spent the whole day in that blind, according to Grandma. This was repeated for days around the dinner table. I distinctly remember it was a Thursday evening, and everyone was in the house because it was raining. The phone rang, and my mom answered it, and she was very quiet, apparently just listening intently to whoever was talking. My dad said, "Who is it?" She held up her finger as if to say, "Hold on a minute." Then she blurted out, "He shot a what?" Followed by, "What the hell's a booger?" My father stood up and grabbed the phone, asking to speak to his father. He was pacing around the kitchen and rubbing his head and spoke to my grandpa. "I will remind you again that this was Thursday, and this weekend happened to be our weekend to go visit. For the sake of time, I'll pick up on when we got to their house Saturday morning." Grandpa was crazy excited to tell us everything that had happened. He took us straight away out to the yard by the blind he was sitting in. He said that he spent almost his entire week out there waiting for something to happen. And on Thursday at 5, it did. While sitting in the blind, he saw this giant booger, as he called it, coming out of the Chattahoochee forest. He watched it walk about an 1/8 mile right up to the trees, where he said it actually stopped and was looking at the fruit. He said he had a heavy shot in his Remington and immediately hit the booger with 2 shots. It jumped into the air like a cat on a hot tin roof. With that, he stood up and the booger was already heading for the trees. He said he fired 3 more rounds and was sure he hit it, but it just kept running. He said he couldn't believe that the booger didn't go down. But it was a long shot and he knew that he hit it squarely at least twice, if not more. Now, my dad had done his best to explain what a booger was on Thursday night, but now we were listening to Grandpa's version. He said the booger was bigger than a horse on its hind legs and covered in brown fur. According to him, it was 1,000 pounds and as wide as a Volkswagen. When he hit it with the buckshot, it jumped about 5 feet off the ground, at which point he hit it again on the way down. Even after hitting it, the booger ran faster than a racehorse across the field into the trees. It was during that run that he tried to lead it with 3 other shots, hoping to hit it again. He kept imitating what it looked like when it jumped, and we were rolling with laughter. We know now that what he shot was a Bigfoot, but back then the locals just call them boogers, and the Cherokees call them hairy men. They never again had an issue with the fruit in their field, and Grandpa talked about that day until the day he passed. Well, I tell you what, I don't care how old that story was. I love stories like that. What do you think? I have no doubt that was a real story right there. Let me know what you think down in the comments. That was a pretty fun one. Well, have you had a Bigfoot encounter? Drop me an email, cryptidmysterious@gmail.com. I'd love to hear about it. Gotta run? I'll see y'all in the next one. Appreciate y'all.